So today we are here, Team Artemis, with our co-founder and CEO, Simon Oberman, and we'll be talking about the adjusting to the changing landscape of CSR. As we all understand that this is an industry which is going through a lot of changes right now due to all the external factors that are taking place. And sometimes it's also good to get some, expert understanding as to how we can cope up with these changes and make sure that we as CSR experts and also as our companies keep on growing. So with that, I'll be handing over the stage to Simon. He's the CEO and co-founder of Artemis Impact, who will be holding the webinar today for you guys.
Thank you very much, Priyam. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Very nice to meet you. Before we kick in, I just wanted to go over a few points. Obviously today, the purpose is, we're trying to share some top line insights and some examples into what we've been seeing so far in the CSR landscape. Obviously, my goal is to make sure that, all of you walk away with, having learned something or being able to see something new. I would like to open up the floor because we have a nice tight group today to make sure that, if you guys have any questions along the way, please just type them into the chat, into the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to those questions as well. We have just under an hour for today, and we have some material to get through. So if you don't get to all the questions throughout, we should have some time at the end as well to go over any questions you might have or any things you might want to share. Okay. So without further ado, let us begin. So who am I? My name is Simon Oberman. As Priya mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Artemis Impact. I've been in the tech space now for just over 10 years. Led a few tech companies throughout my career in Europe and also in Southeast Asia, throughout which we've, in some organizations, we also function in consulting some top Southeast Asian Fortune 500 companies. Currently also I'm the acting chair of the community for the corporate citizenship community of AmCham Indonesia. I'm working together with the American Chamber of Commerce and the American company counterparts to push more corporate citizenship concepts. This in effect has been my career and my input into this. So that's me. If you have any questions about myself, please feel free to ask. If we can get to the next slide, Priyam. What are we talking about today? Well, first, I want to go through a few of the key trends that we've been seeing in sustainability and in CSR in our region, and what these trends mean for companies. What are the actions, effects, and responses that we've been seeing in the region. Then I want to talk about the role of impact measurement. What is impact measurement, and what are the key elements that we've identified? And some of the challenges that we've been seeing and opportunities, and just going over that. And I think that should fill our time nicely for today. So first key trend that I would like to look into is regulation. We've been seeing now, as of this year and last year and the year before as well, some partially, that publicly listed companies in Indonesia as well as Singapore have to give mandatory sustainability reports. What does that mean? Well, that means that we are seeing from the macro point of view that the geopolitical landscape is changing in a format that the private sector is more and more fiscally as well as just generally responsible to be reporting on our actions. Now, obviously, the mandatory sustainability reports are very specific to the countries in need and to the private sector demands. But what we've been seeing is that not just the regulatory part has been adapted so that the public listed companies, but in general, more than 80% of companies are starting to publish sustainability reports. So if you guys are working in a company that is not publishing a sustainability report of any sort, then you would find yourself in the minority today. If we go to the next slide, and the next trend, and I think this is much more of a slightly in-depth trend, is that we're seeing more and more customers being crucial in pushing the idea of impact forward. We've been seeing in key research, especially in a region, it's actually just over but 1 out of 3 customers value ethical practices and sustainabilities in the products and services that they buy. I mean, just for an example, we've been seeing massive growth in revenue for companies like Patagonia that continue to be market leaders and have been seeing minimal 10% year-on-year growth from 2015 onwards. Key thing that we have to consider here is that, before, I guess, impact was popular, the idea was always, what is the ROI? Do we have any research on this? Is there any proof? Well, the proof is there now, and the ROI is very plain to see. Investing into impact allows you to tap into either securing your existing customers or securing a new part of customers, showing that you have ethical practices and sustainabilities tied to your products and to your services. Now, finally, also what we're seeing, and this might be more interesting for the higher level stakeholders you have in your organizations, but ESG investments will continue to increase. We've been in, from our line of work, chatting with organizations like BlackRock and KKR, but they have put sustainability at the heart of their investment ethos. It's a huge pivotal point, obviously, to see that listed investor bases are putting this into their core investment strategy. Just for example, going into BlackRock investment guidelines, they are having exclusionary screens, which means they're removing certain companies entirely based on business involvement, sector, or general controversy. There's a huge thematic movement we've been seeing from BlackRock, particularly under ESG, such as the carbon emissions, diversity, and more in-depth also, looking into creating frameworks and their own internal frameworks, how to value the different indicators and variables you would find under environmental, social, or governance. Then also the ESG broad aspect, they're scoring ESG data at the security or asset level, right? Which means that they're actually looking on the full, accounting aspect of how capital is being distributed and also assets are being aligned within the organizations that they're investing in. And obviously, this also includes going beyond and actually valuing the impact being created by these policies, not just the actual policy enactment. So we can see that it's not just, let's say, arbitrarily one aspect, but we see it comes from the consumers, it comes from the investors, and it comes from government. So what does this mean for companies? What does that mean for your organizations? What does that mean for your position that you're in? Well, on one key part is disclosures are becoming much more and more important, pivotal, if not mandatory. Being able to report, being able to analyze, showing implications are already playing crucial roles in investment decisions by all stakeholders, whether a customer buys a product, whether BlackRock buys stock, or whether government is supporting specific organizations or allowing them to function at all. These are key components that are being influenced by the trends that I just mentioned. Secondary is also the transparency. How do you create accountability? Key thing that we have to consider is that customer bases are very skeptical and very, very, critical in how they pursue these things. Sub trends like SDG washing, greenwashing are not sub trends anymore. They're very well known, and they get, consecutively called out and also identified. We're having more watchdog organizations out there take it on themselves to protect customers from things like SDG washing and greenwashing. So it becomes very important to note that what kind of reporting and disclosures you do, that you have accountability or even verifiability of those data. Now, finally, And this is, I think, the key thing, what this does mean for companies is that impact measurement is here to grow. Things are moving from risk management to impact creation and management, measurement. And I think the key thing that we also have to consider is that moving from risk management to impact creation is a step that's very natural, and is a step that is not necessarily complex, but it does take effort and capital investment to be able to get there. Now, how does measurement and data take center stage? Well, let's first define what impact measurement is. It's identifying the positive and negative effects one's business has on people and the planet. So key point I want to point out here is positive and negative. A lot of the SDG washing and greenwashing tends to be on this plane of only pointing out the positive. But really, for transparency and also for verifiability's sake, you want to be able to do both. You want to be able to see what your positive and negative effects are. Otherwise, you will never know the extent of what it is that you actually would be moving forward to fix. Now, the key elements of doing impact measurement, how do you do that and how do you go about it? Well, there are three key aspects that you want to be diving into. One is impact strategy. Two is data management. How do you manage the data? What do you do with it? And three is reporting and communication. All three parts of these are equally important, but they obviously go in different levels of complexity, because impact strategy could be very simple, it could be straightforward, it could be highly complex. Data management could be simple. It could be done depending on your business nature very differently. And reporting and communication could be more quantitative or more qualitative. Now, what do we need for effective impact measurement? What do you need to be able to do to get to the level where you are doing all these things well? Well, there are three kind of key monikers of any organization that can do good impact measurement as well as reporting. It's flexibility, granularity, and speed. What do we mean by flexibility? We mean that you are able to adapt to changing regulations and frameworks. Key point to consider is that right now in Southeast Asia, we have about 200 active impact frameworks that are all governed and produced and supported by various different international organizations, NGOs, governmental organizations, and also very differently adapted. Just as an example, people you might know have heard about ESG, GRI, SROI, just to mention some of the three big ones. And these are frameworks that are obviously all have their own merits in what they portray and how they're being used. But you as an organization are expected to be able to adapt to any of them depending on the requirement and who it is that is asking you for the report. Because your actions wouldn't change, it was just a framework of how you measure. And flexibility is a key aspect in today's world in impact measurement to be able to understand and function across the board. The other thing is granularity, having in-depth data for better decision-making. What do we mean by in-depth data? Well, in-depth data, we mean that you want to be able to know where what has come from. And an example of that could be that, let's say, for example, you work with factories or you work with, counterparties, different offices and stores. You have to be able to identify regionally where this data is coming from and what change you are creating and how your impact is traceable, because you don't necessarily have to verify every single piece, but it has to be verifiable for it to be trustable. Because, even if we think about, modern day accounting, there's a certain level of audit potential that will be coming up in the future. So granularity is really not something that you want to be giving up on. And the other thing is speed, being able to stay proactive. All of you who are in the webinar today, this is a step towards proactivity, right? Learning understanding, being able to make these decisions ahead of time will give you a lot of time saving and resource saving later down the line when suddenly reports are mandatory in different fields, or suddenly senior management decided, oh, we want to do this, this, and that, or new activities that come to light or new research has come to light. You want to be able to be flexible and to be granular. You have to have proactive speed. Now, what are the challenges in doing impact measurement? Now, from our current clients and also our network, we've identified some of these as the highest challenges that we've seen. One is, as I said, as I mentioned before, there's multiple frameworks. There's a lot of frameworks that are active. They're very difficult to choose from. Usually you need to require special training. And very often, there's a certificate you can get, you can be certified, etc. And the space is constantly evolving. Who's to say that, by the end of 2022, we won't have 100 more frameworks? Resources are being spent for better research, for better science. Now, it is not your job to know every framework, but it is your job to be able to move across these frameworks and understand them. And also data management is difficult, right? You high resource requirement to be able to manage a lot of data. A lot of organizations are not ready or equipped or have the budgets to manage data across the board. And conventional methods are prone to error. What do we mean by conventional methods? Well, we've been seeing a lot of companies before we get to work with them to still report their impact data via PowerPoint slides being sent to HR, or Excel sheets being badly executed, but also being sent to subdivision of corp communications. And in the whole corporate wheel, this can get lost very easily, right? So that part, these two parts can be very difficult to navigate. So what are the opportunities? Well, there's, I think, two main opportunities that we can kind of, discuss a little bit today and go through. But on the one side, obviously, there's digital tools. There's specific platforms you could use. There's generalist platforms you can use. Key thing with these platforms is you want them to hit exactly all these points. You want to have speed. You want to have granularity, you want to get flexibility, but also you need it to be economical. Most CSR departments that we are aware of, they don't have budgets to invest in crazy technologies or platforms. You need something that fits into your budget. You need something that kind of builds it out for you. And also you need growing expertise. You need something that is easy to access, that is constantly updated, and make the frameworks user-friendly. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that the GRI framework necessarily is the most user-friendly to get certified from and directly implement. There's a high sensibility of science behind it. The same with the SRI framework, that there's a very big part of calculation that can get lost across the board, if not very well managed across all points. So there's a certain sensibility of user-friendliness that you would like to get to be able to help you with these implementing these different frameworks. So what is it that we do? What is it that Artemis does, right? Well, key thing that we provide from our perspective, and also just to consider, is that we're an impact service technology provider. We want to help people do more good. We've been in the space now in impact social sector for 3+ years now, actively building technology and services, and that's where we've seen most of the trends and most of our clients. And we're building we built our impact proprietary impact technology around that. There are services that can be provided around impact consultancy, impact training, our impact platform. But key thing to consider is that as we are discussing through these things and the trends and the opportunities, really one of the biggest opportunities is also self-learning, being able to train and being able to implement these different things into your company and to your organization. So what is it that we have? And this is one of the key opportunities that you can explore in the future, is our all-in-one impact management solution. We have a web app where you can create your projects, whether that's your sustainability activities, your drives, your interventions. You can visualize the impact, you can collect your data, You can analyze your data. There's a mobile app you can use across the board, if that's internal or even external to help collect data. You can even collect offline data if there's no internet connection. We have quite a few clients that work in farming or have multiple factories where connection is not always available. Now, we have a bit of time left for questions, and I'm sure that a few of you have a lot of questions around the idea of impact and maybe even have done some exploration, which is why you're here today. So I'd like to take the next 20 minutes that we still have left over for you guys to go over any questions you might have for me that I can answer around impact measurement, impact reporting, or anything about that. So are there any questions? If you guys would prefer asking these questions in Bahasa instead of English, please feel free. We do have some of our Bahasa team here as well who could answer. Oh, there we go. Do you provide certification for impact training? So we have our own certified trainers, part of our team, and from that specifically, we can help guide towards specific certifications depending on also which kind of frameworks you're going into. Obviously, we would always push for our clients to get self-certified as well. Just because we think they're very good skill sets to have in the future to come. As I'd mentioned, as we go forward and the space is changing and the space is adapting, we're seeing more and more changes as they go. Now, once you have one certification in one thing and your team is building these skill sets within your CSR, you'll be much more able to be flexible across other frameworks as well. Key thing is though, with certification, it doesn't mean that you should only stick to one framework. We always think or say, and this is what we do with most of our clients that we also work with, to focus specifically on being able to go across frameworks. So understanding why one framework is similar to the other and also different. So it's very important that kind of is just being done consecutively and also continuously. You should never stop learning. Thank you for that question. Do we have any other questions? So what is the difference between ESG scorecard and impact measurement? Is there anything on the ESG scorecard that is not covered in impact measurement? Okay, so if we are thinking about ESG in terms of a framework, right? And impact measurement as the total concept of what it takes to measure impact. Then we have to kind of separate them into the two different types of processes, right? An ESG scorecard is effectively a risk management checklist that says we are doing or not doing any of these things, right? So it's kind of a plus minus value. Impact measurement would be the next step after something like an ESG scorecard. So an ESG scorecard is enough to get you past certain regulation points, but it's not enough to put you in a position where customers will engage with you or BlackRock investors will engage with you because they look for the uptick, right? So an ESG scorecard is good, but it's a good start, right? So what we've been seeing so far, it's kind of like the entry-level format of getting into creating impact. And effectively what it says, across, let's say, for example, environmental points, it has environmental points across, not damaging certain things or what your policies are for your office supplies or what your policies are for your office recycling. Whilst in social, it does have things next to social hiring, but it also has things towards creating, having a social influence on communities, right? So these things are all covered, but they're covered in small bits in terms of risk management, making sure you're not doing bad things, right? Now, impact measurement would to say, if you don't do any bad things, what are the good changes that you are creating, right? So being able to tap into consumers that buy from, let's say, companies like Patagonia, they would want to see what kind of positive influence you have. So let's say per product I spend, what is it that I am avoiding? Or it could be something along the lines of, let's say DHL or some kind of other logistics company has implemented specific business strategies or interventions to not just decrease how much CO2 is being spent per package, but also even increase by providing specific types of packaging or whatever. So it's having that positive uptick. So one is to keep the equilibrium, and the other one is to create positive influence on any kind of level. I hope that answers the question. Any other questions? What's the difference between an impact report and a sustainability report? So I guess it's just kind of semantics, right? So a sustainability report, to nowadays, it has that name because that's what everybody does. Everyone's doing a sustainability report because the idea of sustainability is a little bit larger than impact, right? Sustainability, let's say, would take into account what are your mantras and what is your policies, and what are your what do you call that? Like, what are your sorry, I'm blanking on the word right now, but basically what it is that your company believes in, your mission, right? Your sustainability report is like, it could be 30 pages, 40 pages, right? It could be this whole thing. And I'm sure that you guys have seen, some of the tech sustainability reports that have come out last year, or, post COP26, in terms of, making big statements, what shall be done. That would be your sustainability report. Your impact report could be 1 or 2 or 3 pages, right? Your impact report is basically putting down, these were the key actions, these were the key activities, this is the resources we used, this is the change we created in these areas or in these sectors. So the impact report is kind of like the part of the sustainability report that talks about what has been done to change what, right? So it's kind of like the more specific part of the sustainability. It is influenced by the framework that you use for that specific report, obviously, but one, I would say, traditionally is much larger than the other. So the impact report is part of the sustainability report. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Are there any other questions? No? Well, if there are not any questions for now, I would love to invite all participants to, maybe if you have questions at a later point, to send us or email us or reach out to us for any questions you might have on this topic. We'll be following up with a few things just to make sure that obviously, you got some information out of this and some engagement. But other than that, I thank you very much for joining me today on this short, concise webinar on some of the key trends that we've been seeing and some of the key opportunities we see around the region as well. Thank you. Priya?
Thank you so much, guys. We will be sending you out the presentation, the recording of the presentation webinar as well, in case you want to go through some of the material. And if any follow-up questions come up, please do get in touch with us. You'll have the email there. And otherwise, you can also follow us on social media on LinkedIn and Instagram. It's Artemis_Impact, where we regularly post a lot of information about different ESG frameworks, different corporate trends that are going on. So you can keep yourself updated with that information as well. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Eos. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you here.